Good morning, I'm David. I understand now why Russell invited me to talk today, because my discussion, my expertise, my passion follows on to what he was talking about in terms of where the future is. And if I think about it, and I'll talk a little bit about this, I talk about this often, he's talking about the buckets. I talk about how you fill the buckets. I'm passionate about operationalizing storytelling, which probably sounds awful, but I am the child of two librarians, so I believe that there is so much information out in the world, and I'm really interested in making sure that it's available to us, whether it comes from the media, whether it comes from organizations like the folks are here, whether it comes from companies. I don't care. I just want the information. I want it to be good. So I like to talk to folks about how you make it easier to share your information, to feed your beasts. So what I like to start out with is to reminisce about the good old days when water came in a glass, when you were thirsty. You just went to the tap or the well or the bucket or the pump and you filled your glass, but the world changed. We got a little busier, we needed to get around places, so we invented some kinds of bottles, glass, plastic. Then we got even busier, we got a little bit more sensitive about the impact that these bottles were making. We got some new bottles, different shapes, colors, different kinds of things that they're made of, aluminum, plastic. Then we got really busy, and the world got really intense, and we needed to get some backpacks. We needed to get some belts, we needed to have bottles with handles, and my favorite is the bottle where you could put your iPhone. I just found that while I was doing it. I definitely need to get that. This is really what's happened in the media over the last few years, and certainly for all of your individual experiences. You may have had a newsletter that you sent out once a year. Then you maybe had a website. Now you've got this. Very similar to that and this, but there's a lot of stuff out there. There are a lot of glasses that need to be filled, and often it can really feel like this. All those hungry little mouths that need to be fed puts a lot of taxing effort on you to tell your story effectively. The good thing is, much like with the water bottles, what fills those lots of different things and the little beasts, it's water, it's content. We have tons of content. It doesn't feel like that all the time, but what I'm here to talk to you about is how you can unlock what you already have and use it to fill the channels effectively to tell your story. And where I get my inspiration from, and I'm going to actually tell you two different paths, but where I get my inspiration from is from the time that I was in the media and what the media has been doing now, because they've been very good at using social media. Mostly because they've got lots of content, and they got to make money by serving up that content. So I'm going to talk to you about two different things that are happening. One of them has been around for a while. It's a little bit more of a well-trodden path, and you've probably heard it maybe in different settings. And then I'm also going to talk about what's starting to happen now, this new path that's happening, particularly that's starting again with the media, but I think that you're going to see more and more organizations starting to adopt it. So first thing is, think like a publisher. Now, as I said, I was in the newsroom at the Wall Street Journal right when social media was coming out, right when Twitter came out and Facebook started to be available. I loved it. It was fantastic. Okay, you're telling me that I could post this content on your platform to reach an audience. I don't have to maintain that platform, and I could do it for free? And I have an opportunity to link back to my website or my property and get people to see that? Fantastic, sign me up. How many Twitter handles can I have? Doesn't matter. I want them all. I want Facebook, everything. We were doing 200 to 400 pieces of content a day. So it was very easy to take advantage of those platforms. Anybody here doing 200 to 400 pieces of content a day? Probably not. But you are doing content creation. So what you start to think about, and what you need to do, is think about how media companies do what they do. What are they doing to make it easier to create their content that you can adapt for your storytelling purposes? So the first thing I always talk about is think about all of your outputs as you're doing the creation, and that can be the most difficult thing. You have to really think at the very beginning, where's this going to go, and how can I start to slice and dice it? That's really the first thing that media companies do, because they're thinking about, how do I put this on all the things that I need to have so that I can monetize it, so I can put ads next to it. So if you're starting out and you're creating a newsletter or a blog post, or an update on your website, start to think about, how can I slice this up? I could probably turn this blog post into 12 tweets over the course of a bunch of days. I can turn that email newsletter into a blog post, which then leads to tweets and a couple of Facebook posts. Thinking in that way makes it a lot easier to fill that endless amount of time that you need to fill on those social media platforms. The second thing that media companies use are templates. They do not create from scratch. They do the same things over and over and over again. They do it every week, they do it every month, they do it every year. End of year, every media organization is doing a, hey, let's look back at what happened this year, and let's look ahead to what we're doing next year. Every Friday, a newspaper has here what you should do this weekend. My favorite example is the New York Times magazine feature, where they do 20 questions. And every week they go out and they find some interesting, fascinating person and they ask them 20 questions, and then they transcribe it and post it onto the website and into the magazine. It's always interesting. It can't take more than 3 hours to do. That allows them to create that consistent space in the magazine and on the website so that they can go off and do the heavy-duty, long, deep storytelling opportunities. They need to make sure that they're filling that space every day. So if you start to think about, how can I create a template? It's one of the things we do at Vulcan, particularly for our internal communications, is we do a 2 minutes with. Simple template. We know that we can go out and talk to either somebody who's a partner or an employee or anything like that. Once a week, sit down for 2 minutes, probably takes a little bit more than that, and just create some really compelling content out of that, because you're getting that human story, you get a photo out of it, you can even start to do it in video, and you can use that both on your internal and external sites, as well as across social media. The other thing that media companies do really well is repeat. They post things again and again and again. And a lot of times, organizations are uncomfortable with that kind of repetition. You feel like you're maybe saying the same thing over and over again. And we actually just recently had this debate. Are we tweeting too much? And we use, primarily for Vulcan, we used Twitter, and we do a bunch of different projects. We looked at it, and we were doing between 7 and 12 tweets a day. If you break that down, that is less than one every other hour. And of course, it's a 24-hour time now, so you don't really have to think about it in the 9 to 5 piece. And if you think about how people are consuming, particularly on social media now, they're not sitting there and watching your Twitter handle every day, every minute. They're logging on once, maybe twice a day, scrolling in and out and up and down. So if you post something on a Monday morning at 11 o'clock, you could post pretty much the same thing at Thursday at 5 and probably catch a totally different audience. And that's very much the way media companies are thinking about. I always have a fourth one that I forget, so pardon me for a second. 2 more. The other piece is to be relevant. Don't be talking about what's cool that's happening in the summer in the middle of the winter. Think about what's happening in the world when you're posting your content and how you can take advantage of that and bring it onto your own channels. One of my favorite examples now is Throwback Thursday, right? This is a fantastic thing. Everybody is looking for Throwback Thursday content on Thursdays, and it's an opportunity for you to go back in the archives and pull out new stuff that you may have, or old stuff that you may not have posted before. And it's a nice way to easily create some compelling content that adds to your story through that piece. And then the last piece that media companies do that I think we can learn from is make sure you've got something for them to do once they engage with your content. What do you want them to do beyond just read this? Do you want them to follow you? Do you want them to donate? Do you want them to share this? Always be thinking about that. And again, this is where media companies are really good. Let's say you catch something on Twitter or you watch a Snapchat and it brings you back to the media website and you go and watch your video or you see the article. There's always a wrapper around that content. People who read this also read that. Top 5 things that are happening on the website today. This article is related to these 5 other articles. So there's always another opportunity for you to click to the next thing so that they can, of course, get you to read, which, of course, crassly serves up another ad that allows them to make money. If we flip that and think about it from an organizational standpoint, if you're a nonprofit or an organization, you want people to get deeper into your story. You also might have other calls to action for them, to donate, to sign up for an email newsletter, to follow you. So always be thinking about how you can take advantage of that moment that you have with your audience. Something that someone recently told me about that sort of is depressing, but I actually think is really exciting is you have 8 seconds now. 8 seconds is the attention span of most millennials, which is terrifying, right? Which again goes to that repetition. But the beautiful thing is once you crack that 8 seconds, they will literally sit and spend the entire weekend consuming your information. They will read your book, they will watch your 57 different YouTube videos, they will watch your movie, once you crack that 8 seconds. So again, if you think about it in terms of the templates and the repetition and the slicing and dicing, you're just looking, you're hitting them and hoping, your audience, that you're gonna catch them in that 8 seconds and then bam, they're gonna come in and be compelled and they will engage and be part of your information for a really long time. And I forgot to show my beautiful picture of the river because I'm sticking with the water, right? You start from that main trunk of content and then you're letting it flow out. And you're not necessarily creating over and over and over again. All right, so the second piece is a little bit more of the new thing that's starting to happen, and there's some fantastic examples. You probably have a website. It's creaky. It was designed 5 years ago by people who don't work here anymore. No one knows how the CMS works anymore. If you have a CMS, you're using this terrible old-fashioned email newsletter piece. It's okay to start thinking about abandoning those platforms because that's what more and more organizations are starting to look at. The world is getting a lot easier for you to go and get the slick new mobile thing. All right? Isn't that fantastic? I love that thing. It's some kind of a Honda. Because of all of the changes that have been happening, and literally they're happening as we speak, there's an opportunity for organizations to use the latest, coolest technology and not be tied down to making sure that people see your things on Twitter, click through, get back to your website to do the thing you want them to do. You can start to take advantage of a whole bunch of new tools. One, Facebook now has buy and donate buttons. All right, if I can get to my audience on Facebook, which they're already there all day, and get them the key call to action I might have on Facebook, why do I even have to get them to my website? It doesn't even matter. The second big thing, or the other additional thing, is you're starting to see those same buttons happening on Twitter, on Instagram, and all these new platforms. They're making it much easier for organizations to take advantage of those things because they need your content. They've got that audience, but they need to keep those pipes filled themselves. So they're trying to make it as easy as possible for you to use their platforms and not necessarily make it just a way station between the initial audience engagement and then bringing them back to your core pieces. The other thing that's happening, and again, this is literally as we speak, Apple News, Google AMP, and Facebook Instant Articles are being opened to all publishers. And everyone in this room could be considered a publisher. These are incredibly powerful, simple tools that allow us to create really compelling stories that work particularly on mobile, which of course is now more than half of the audience is consuming on mobile. And it's very easy to either adjust your existing website or work with these platforms to fill that instant article or that Google AMP and then make it available through the various tools. And again, this is because these organizations need your content, so they're making it easier and easier to open that up. There's a couple of really good examples of where this is happening. My favorite is Funny or Die. If anybody heard this, this was actually started by Will Ferrell. They do funny videos. And when they first started, they were really focused on creating the videos, posting them on their website, then using social to get people to come back and watch the video on the website, because that's how they monetized. And what they've now realized is that because the way the platforms are starting to work, that monetization does not only have to happen on their website. They can monetize through Facebook, they can monetize through Vine and Instagram, on Twitter. So what they're becoming is a nomadic content creation company, where they're creating their funny videos, and they might create a video that goes on YouTube, and they might cut it up and put it on Vine, and they might cut it up and put it on Instagram, and then they can get pieces of the revenue from that without actually having to go out and sell and bring people back to watch the ads on their video, on their own website. So it's kind of an amazing time to just set yourself free and not feel tied down to your website and not feel tied down to the things that you've used traditionally and really become a nomad in terms of a content creator. The reason to really think about that is, if you think about, and I think about websites the most, your website is probably a little sliver up in the Arctic, right? Your website is a tiny piece of real estate in a very, very busy, crowded space. And if you start to just decide that you're going to let go of all of these things and just become great storytellers based on what you have, you don't have to worry as much about maintaining that little tiny slice of real estate, which is somewhere in the hinterlands that's going to be very hard to get people to. You can reach your audience with your stories without having to build the infrastructure that you need to get there. So these are my tips and tricks for you to steal from the media, to be able to unlock, as we've seen, all of this amazing content, to reach your audiences and get them to care about what you're doing and care about the things that you're interested in and do the action that you want them to do. Because and actually the premise of, I should have set this up at the beginning, but my premise of this whole talk is you don't really have a choice. You have to feed those beasts because your audiences are desperate for information and content about you. And so how we think about doing it is to make it as easy as possible, to be as compelling as possible. And then your beasts can be really, really well fed and everybody's happy. The audience, your organization, your board, and particularly on the social channels. Thank you.